let's move on to plant stuff here. Um,
And my voodoo balls are not doing anything.
wait,
They
wait,
don't
they haven't
even,
sprouted yet? Now,
no, they
now
don't
they're now,
even sprout.
yeah, they didn't make a flower stalk. Now they need warmth and moisture. So either they gotta wait till you go outside, or you need to bring the pot up where it's warmer and start watering it. Started early because the sprout that comes by itself is the flower stalk, and yours were not big enough to flower, so they didn't make a flower stalk, and now they're not going to make their leaf stalk until it gets to the right temperature and moisture. So they won't do anything until you plant them or start treating them like they're a potted plant.
Okay, but one of them was just about the size of the one I gave to you.
And I'm not sure that that would have flowered because I didn't bring it in for the winter. Sad,
Oh,
sad.
no, but I mean, it should have been big enough to make
Yeah.
at least a sprout. Sure.
You know, we treat them well, we give them names, we make them members of the family, and then they do what they want to do anyway, these plants.
Yeah, I know. And I almost sent you an email. My amaryllis, all they had was two blossoms, and they used to have four on one stalk.
Have
And I
you've
bought
kept the
my,
you kept the bulb from year to year?
yeah, those are old bulbs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because if you put them outside and let them grow as much as they can grow, then they'll bulk up. But otherwise, they do a little bit like the tulips that we put into the ground. They're big, lusty, hybrid, late blooming tulips. And they're going to bloom for a year or maybe 2 years well, and then they're going to go quickly downhill because our gardens are not the ideal conditions like they were in the growing field. So you need to that amaryllis this year, put it outside, let it grow outside. Come September or so, you can dig it up or bring the pot in and let it start drying down so that it stops growing. But let it have full light after it blooms, after the bloom finishes for a couple of months. And I bet then it'll bloom with more flowers next year.
Okay, okay. Well, I can't put them out until the 14th of July, remember? Because that fly is around which lays some eggs in them and then they eat the bulbs.
Right, the amaryllis narcissus fly gets into them. You could put it out and put a piece of floating row cover over it. I'll send you some. We're gonna be at Wiegand's in April. I'll bring some with me, or I'll see if they've got some there. But you put some floating row cover over it, and the fly can't get to it.
Oh, I didn't know they had something.
Yeah.
Oh, and I intend to be there.
It's like a little. Well, I think they haven't. I think they're just printing their flyers for it now. Has anyone got any questions here? We were into amaryllis and voodoo lilies. If anybody's got any questions, we've got a few minutes before we officially start. And you can put them into chat, or you can turn on your. I think most people know about the microphones and the cameras, keeping them off. The raise your hand control.
Nancy's got a hand up.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi.
Hello.
So I cut down all the Russian sage that every year it's one of the older varieties, so it just grows real spindly and in my opinion just took
Yeah, for me, all
looks
the
too
varieties do. I'm still not sold on.
ratty.
Yeah. So anyway, you cut them all down.
So I wanted to know as they're growing during the year, since they don't really flower till later in the summer, can I keep trimming them back like we do with the mums? And
Yeah.
that they'll get shorter and bushier?
They might get shorter and bushier. They might sucker more. That's one of the problems with Russian sage. We cut them back hard, and they go, oh, fine, and they go sideways before they come up. So they might get a little bit wider. But they should bloom. I haven't tried pinching them because I just got disgusted with them flopping all over the place. But you would have to stop trimming them maybe four 4 weeks out, sometime in the middle of July, because they're
Okay.
going to bloom a little later anyway when you're trimming them back. But you keep trimming them for too long, and you're going to stall the flower off to where the light situation isn't right.
So the same thing that we do with the mums. And there's somebody I can't remember the name of this gardener who's in Connecticut or something, Maine. She calls it the Chelsea chop, where you cut it in May, you cut it in June, you cut it in July, the mums,
Three
and then they
times
get
by the fourth.
sorted.
Yep. 3 times by the fourth is the other way of saying it with the mums.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
But
I wouldn't worry too much about how about whether you cut them 3 times, but definitely cut them when you feel like cutting them, when they look like they're starting to get straggly. When they're thinning out and getting taller, then chop them back. I cut them back by half or so when I cut them back, which is more than they say. They say cut them back by a third. I go,
yeah, but that'll work on the lab on the Russian sage as well, or maybe
it
not.
should. It should. I haven't done it, but it should. It's got the same trigger for bloom that the mums do, where the days getting shorter are going to trigger it to bloom, and so you just got to stop cutting it and give it enough time to feel the shorter days, the shortening days.
It's
Okay,
worth
thank you.
trying. What the heck? You don't like it, what it does.
The only problem is it's not at my house.
Yeah,
Well, if the client doesn't like it where it is, it's another thing. But yeah, that could be a
Yeah.
problem. Whose house in
I
their
just
case?
I just told people send them out to Utah. In Utah and Nevada, you should see Russian sage. It is a shrub. It's sturdy and straight up and down, but here we got too much moisture for it, really. This looks like
Thanks.
yeah, okay. This looks like one of those Sesame Street monsters, Steve, with
Yep.
all the burned needles. This is a weeping Japanese red pine. They're not entirely hardy when it gets down to being the actual zone 5 that it can be in our area. And this one is telling us how deep the snow was on that coldest day.
Yeah. It was in 2006,
Yep.
this date.
Oh, that's right. Steve picked pictures of this date from other years, so you might be able to see the crocuses blooming at the feet of that weeping red pine. Little
And
lavender crocuses
even
coming up.
some stuff in the ditch.
In other years, we still had snow and snow sculptures melting out.
So no questions in chat so far.
Okay.
And that was in March too.
Yep. And this was the year that I noticed that the garter snake had the same color tongue as the insides of the crocus. Okay. I think if there's no questions,
Yeah, it's after 7 anyway.
we can move on, because most people know about raising their hand, and we'd love to hear you talk. So raise your hand if you'd like to talk. In your reactions or in participants, someplace there's that thing. Otherwise, go in for the chat.
Oh.
You take it, Steve.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to Free4All Friday. All gardeners are welcome. Come celebrate growing and cultivate problem solving with us.
Yeah, this is gardenataz.org. It's our 35th time meeting you on a Friday to just talk about what's going on. I'm Janet McConovich,
I'm Stephen Nicola.
and that was this year too. I mean, it was nice out there. We've had definite rebound spring here in Michigan. I hope you're using gardenataz.org for what we put it up for, which is just there's no ads there, there's no sponsors there, there's no pop-ups, there's no cookies. It's just a place for us to park articles so that we can write new ones and not write the same ones again. I'll show you a couple that we referenced that came up this week that are already in there, and let us move on from there. Because we've got lots of things that we've written, books and magazine articles and lots of classes that we're still putting things up there. And tell people about Free4All Friday. Tell them about our weekend webinars, our weekend walkabouts, because we are supporting our website and the Zoom link and those expenses that we have for this entirely with the subscribers to our weekend walkabout webinars. And that's letting us open up on Fridays. So tell people about Fridays. We welcome everybody to come, but also tell them that we've got webinars, and you can come to one, you can come to the whole season. They're a deal. This is from right now too, huh, Steve?
Yep.
Years, the spring comes.
I think this was 2010 or 11.
Yeah.
Might have been. Just as you mentioned, raise hand, I noticed Kathleen had put a hand up, but then pulled it down once we started our official. I wonder if she still has a question. Nobody has put one in chat. So,
I see a direct message on mine here.
yeah.
I forgot to tell people, I'll read you this question in a second. You can't see it, but please send all chat to the whole meeting group. If you dial it to just me or Steve, we may not see it because we're not good at managing the individual messages. So Kathleen's writing, if I want to plant a plant or bush about 6 feet high to block the view to my neighbor's yard, would a lilac bush work in a relatively small space with 2 hours of full sun and 2 or so of partial sun? Lilacs. The standard lilac is a 2-story plant. It'll get to be 6 feet, but then it'll keep going, so you'd have to keep pruning it. The dwarf lilac is 8 to 10 feet, so you'd still want to prune that to a certain extent.
But with 4 hours of
4 hours of sun, I don't.
light, lilac won't grow as.
Yeah, and it kind of depends. We have a lilac on the side of our house that only gets direct sun in the afternoon for about 3 hours in the summertime. And it blooms okay. I mean, it does bloom. It doesn't bloom wonderfully, but you want it to grow a little bit faster than that. I think we want a 6-footer that has more of a liking for shade. And I would probably put a spice bush there, or I think spice bush is probably the best bet because it'll try to get bigger than 6 feet, but it's a lot easier to keep small than a lilac.
Yeah, that I was just thinking of a viburnum like ours in the back, but that will get a lot bigger too.
Yeah, a leatherleaf viburnum would do it for you too, but you would have to keep it cut eventually. One of the panicle hydrangeas would bloom back there and would get up there pretty quickly. Why don't you put one of the panicle hydrangeas there? None of these will help you in the winter time. These would only be summer blocks because they're going to lose their leaves. Even the leatherleaf viburnum some years loses its leaves, so it wouldn't be there. But I think I would try a spice bush or one of the panicle hydrangeas like limelight, or I don't really like limelight that much.
Part of if you could find it.
Quick fire is a nice one. Not little.
Nancy suggested Pyrrhus japonica.
It's a Pyrrhus japonica, also called Japanese Andromeda, are very nice plants, but they're like rhododendrons and azaleas. They need an acid soil and a continuously moist condition. I've seen some hit 6 feet in our area around Beverly Hills, Lathrop Village, where it's a little more protected. But I don't recommend that one for the everyday gardener because it's got a lot of problems if it's not in the right site.
Right plant, right place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Judith is saying she's late to start her veggie and flower seeds. She's in zone 6A. What should she start right now that will thrive in New England spring and summer?
Oh, well, number one, I don't mean to discourage anybody, but you are not late in starting veggies.
Nope.
April 1st is about the earliest that you want to start them because what you want to do is start your seeds inside, and as soon as they sprout, get them outside. Get them out of the warm place that caused the tomatoes. The tomato needed 70 degrees to sprout, but as soon as you get it sprouted, get it into 55 degrees someplace, either outside in a cold frame or underneath lights in a cold room in your house, or wait until later in April 15th, April 24th. But 2 weeks is the maximum amount of time you really want to keep things growing inside, unless you've got a really good light setup in a cool room. So you're not late. And what did we want to know? We wanted to know. Sorry.
What would thrive in New England spring and summer?
For the earliest stuff, we always did lettuce, radishes. The kales do pretty well. They like to start a little warmer, and then get a little colder. Usually it was lettuces, all different kinds of lettuces for early on in the year. And you can sow those right outside. Peas, you can sow your peas outside right now. They will, my friend Jim always used to sow his peas on St. Patty's Day. He said, that's what you're supposed to do. They didn't come up until a month later sometimes. Depends on how warm the ground got, but that would be. So what about putting peas out? And then you get your first crop, and by the time they're done giving you some peas for the salads and stuff, maybe about the middle of June, you can start another set of peas because those are going to kind of poop out as they get into the warmth of the summertime. What else? I guess I'm going to have to think about it. Anybody else going to
Yep.
advise anything? Irina mentions that the Andromeda is slow.
She mentioned too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Pyrrhus japonica. You shouldn't be calling it several different names all at once.
Well,
It's also called lily. It's also called lily of the valley shrub because it's got the white flowers that dangle down. But it is definitely in the same. It's in the same family as rhododendrons and azaleas and has the same needs for a lot of acidity in the soil in order to be able to get the nutrients. Acidity in the soil is not all that important, but when the soil is acid, which means that when water gets into it, it combines with usually sulfur, sometimes some other things that are in the soil, and it becomes an acid. The water actually becomes acidic, like a vinegar. And that acidic moisture causes nutrients to come loose from the soil particles that wouldn't come loose otherwise. So what you do is you starve rhododendrons and azaleas and Pyrrhus japonica, unless you go to intravenous feeding, which isn't quite the right word. But if somebody is feeding you through a tube in your arm, they are bypassing your stomach. If you feed a plant without going to the roots and the soil, then it's kind of like intravenous feeding. So you can mix up water soluble, acid-loving plant fertilizers and make sure when you put them on, you sprinkle them on the plant, let them absorb some through their leaves as well as it gets into the soil. Okay.
Nancy mentioned Kyria too for that spot. Kyria japonica. That could.
Now that's a good one. That's
They
Kyria
could work
japonica is a
there.
good one, about 5-6 feet tall. That's
Yeah.
a great one. There,
Yeah.
Kathleen, do that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Lily Ferguson had a hand up for a second, but then it disappeared. So I'm not sure if she
Okay.
had a question or not. So go ahead.
Well, then we'll proceed here because Irina asked about Montauk daisy last week, and we talked about it a little bit, but maybe people don't know what Montauk daisy is. It's one of the woody perennials like lavender and sage and thyme and candy tuft. And so it's actually a shrub that we treat as a perennial. If you have Montauk daisy and you saw it grow last year, then right now you should not fall for, oh, I'm just a little plant. So here's Montauk daisy. Sorry that we don't have a good picture of it, but we just it's just a daisy that blooms in.
You're not supposed to say that.
What? Oh,
Sorry, we don't have a good picture of.
Well, I mean, we don't have a picture that features it. We didn't go and take a picture of just it because it's just a daisy. It blooms. You can see that the spirea is beginning to turn its fall color back here. And the berries are on the beautyberry. In the fall, at Aster time, at mum time, this one blooms with great big white daisies, and it's big enough that people walking by, that's what it looks like right now. And it is a woody plant. See, the buds are alive all the way up on the branches. And it would start growing from there. Last year, I cut it all the way back, and I'm going to cut it back and show you cutting it back now this year. This is all 1 year's growth. And although there are buds on the branches, and it would start growing from there, and it wouldn't grow quite as far as that last 3 feet in the year. It won't grow as much as 3 feet because now it's branching, so it's dividing its energy, but it's going to be 18 inches or so bigger. And most of the good growth is down at the bottom. You're going to get thinner growth on the branches themselves because why would they want to compete with themselves? And that's my fork stuck in the ground there. And that's a 40-inch fork. So you're looking at a good 3.5 foot tall and 4 foot wide, maybe 5 foot wide plant from being cut back to nothing. That's what it's going to do in 1 year. So what do I do with lavender and with other plants? I go, I'm sorry, I know you're a woody plant, but I'm going to cut you back. And I cut the stems back. I told Steve, why don't you come on out? You can grab a picture because it's time to cut it back anyway. And that's what's left of it. And when I approached it, I went, oh man, these guys are a pain in the butt. because I want to cut each stem and I want to cut it down far enough that I don't end up with stubble in there year after year. So I'm going to cut them one at a time with loppers or with hand pruners, depending on the size of the stem. And I sat down or kneeled down there to work on it and thought, oh, geez, this is 40 or 50 stems. It's 127 stems. And look at all the potential that it's got there to do the same thing this year. So do you cut it back? Yes, I cut it back. Do I leave it with some buds? Yeah, you leave it with some buds. And
And it is ready to go.
one of the low branches, one of the lowest ones that got forced out the side, put itself on the ground, made good enough contact with the soil that it's rooted, and there's a whole separate piece over here. And
So it's definitely going to be bigger, appear bigger than last year.
yeah, and this
I'll
guy's
dig
gonna
that
go.
out.
This guy's gonna go. We don't have room for that.
I thought so because you were trying to pull it out, but it was tough.
Yeah. All right. So any questions of that?
Mary Ellen just mentioned she has started her
Spinach.
broccoli, spinach, mustard, and onion seed.
There you go. You grow mustard. Well, that's kind of cool. Yep. Okay. We'll get back to the spruce in a little while.
Yeah.
Cornelian cherry. People say the forsythia is your first thing to bloom, and they just have not seen enough Cornelian cherries. Cornus mas or Cornus officinalis, it could be either one. But they are one of the earliest to bloom. It's a shrub or small tree. Okay in the shade, better in the sun. Lots of yellow bloom.
Anne wants a confirmation. Did we say cut back lavender to the ground?
I do cut back lavender to the base wherever I see buds still at the base. They're little gray buds ready to come out. I just cut back to the buds. If it's an old lavender, like I didn't find, I didn't leave myself enough time to find a picture of what that Montauk daisy looks like if you don't cut it back. It starts getting straggly. It starts coming out from the tips, and you see a lot of wood. If your lavender is looking like that, where for years you haven't cut it back and it's straggling all over the ground, you might have to cut it back a little this year, let it beef up and get some buds lower down and cut it back harder next year. But if you cut it every year like I do, you cut it all the way down and all you leave are just the little buds showing at the bottom, like I left the buds for the Montauk daisy.
In Arena's area, the deer eat the curia to the ground.
Yeah, there are a lot of plants that are edible. I thought spice bush was one that they didn't eat, and they ate our first spice bush. No, it didn't kill a spice bush. It came back.
Yep.
By the time I got a new one, I looked and went, "Oh shoot, the other one's coming back." But yeah, it's disheartening to see that happening. Now, is this a spring witch hazel?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's Arnold.
Arnold Promise.
Yeah, the vase shape. I mean, the upright vase,
Yeah.
not broad spreading vase. And the bright yellow. That's my guess. I couldn't confirm. That's at a residence, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, we're going to keep on going. Cutting forsythia after bloom. You can do what I'm going to show you here after forsythia blooms. You can just wait till it blooms and cut it all the way to the ground and let it come back again. I've shown you pictures of that in pruning classes, but if you'd like to see pictures of it, if you went to gardenaz.org and did a search for prune forsythia, you would find an article that shows a series of 5 pictures of here it's blooming, there it's gone, here it's coming back, here it is in July. By the end of July, I usually have to trim them again because they get a little wild. Okay, but severely damaged wood. It's a favor this time of year when you notice that rabbits have been eating things, or you're going to want to get rid of the bad wood. You're doing the plant a favor, and you're going to cut and just stand back out of the way. So Irina asked about her dappled willow, her Japanese dappled willow or variegated willow, and that the rabbits had gotten to it. I said, just cut it back to the ground. Let it get new wood and protect it next year. Put a cage around it or something that will keep the rabbits away. You might want to spray the branches with something that tastes bad. But here's dappled willow. This is ours. There are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 of them along the lot line. And when we moved in, they were about this size. And I said, okay, that's as big as I want them to get. And I want lots of new wood on it. I want them to be 5, 6 feet tall so that they're a nice hedge. and a nice place for the birds to sit, but I don't want them to turn into trees, which is what they can do. So every 4 or 5 years, I'm going to cut them all the way back to the ground. These guys have waited 6 years because I didn't get to them last year. Last year, the spring was very strange. I've already cut 3 main of these size branches out of it in order to get my picture here. Otherwise, it's very difficult to see what was going on. And I'm going to cut them all the way down. That's when I'm done. What's behind it is a viburnum that the neighbor is letting grow. That's all that's left. I've cut it down all the way to the ground. Now I did that with this one. This one is number 5, and I did not cut this one back at all when I cut the other ones back. I wanted to leave something for the birds to sit in, and it has proceeded in its 10 years probably that it's had to grow. It's got a trunk, one trunk as big as my leg. I cut off a couple of other trunks already. I'm in the middle of cutting it off here last March. And I've cut it down, taken the weight off the branches, and I'm working on taking the trunk out of there. And I cut it down just like that other one, down to nothing, just as far down to the ground as I could get it to cut. And this is it this year. This is now 12 months later. This is what grew. This is 6 feet tall, straight stems. I actually took some stems out because there were too many stems coming up.
Beautiful foliage color. Beautiful.
Yeah, and especially nice color on the younger wood. The younger wood,
Yep.
as it grows, has a white and a pink edge. The older the wood, the less color on the leaves. So we get beautiful color, we get the block that we need, we get something that's not going to turn into a tree, because they will. I've seen them 20 feet tall. So don't worry about cutting back something that's been damaged. If it was growing well before, when you cut it back, it's going to put all of the stored energy in its roots into pushing out straight growth out of the buds that it's got in store, the dormant buds under the wood. And to the point that Sugruba made about her Sawzall, I used my electric chainsaw on that. Make sure you clean it out. I've taken the chain off, and that's all oily sawdust that follows the chain in as the chain comes in and wraps around the sprocket. So don't let your power tools burn themselves out.
Judith is asking, what's the bush with the deck in the background?
There's an arborvitae here and a yew. And then this bush is the dappled willow. This is 1 year's growth on an established dapple willow that I cut to the ground.
The one that had the huge stem.
Right.
Trunk.
It used to look like this. Here's a piece of it I just cut off. It was a little tree, and I cut it right down to the ground. And that's it this year. That came from the stump.
Okay. Lily asking, how far down should I cut back Caryopteris dark night, and should I do it now?
I cut Caryopteris back just like I do the butterfly bush and the lavender and the Montauk daisy. I cut it down as far as I can so that I don't have stubble. And anytime before it was going to leaf out. So April 1st has been kind of my aim for date. I try to get all the things, the woody plants I'm going to cut back hard. I try to get them back cut hard by April 1st. But sometimes, and especially here at home, over the years when I was working in other people's yards, my home got done last. My garden got done last. So I was cutting things back the end of April, sometimes the beginning of May, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to cut it back, but it makes a fresher plant, a nicer structure on the Caryopteris, and it blooms a little bit later than it would otherwise.
Suzanne is asking, is the advice on the dappled willow applicable to Arctic blue willow? Arctic blue doesn't, if I remember right, doesn't get quite as large.
For the most part, it's supposed to be a dwarf willow, dwarf Arctic willow, but it still will get to be 6-7 feet tall. There is also, go ahead and put that into gardenataz.org, put dwarf willow cut or dwarf willow prune, and you'll see me holding a pile of sticks and nothing but a little mound on the ground. It has a nice, it's called blue willow because it's got kind of a blue purple cast to the stems, and they make nice stems for weaving things and can make a nice color in the winter time.
Yep. Yeah, it's a nice plant. And yes, the advice does apply.
Yes.
You can cut it down.
Yeah. And here's a purple smoke bush cut down. Smoke bush I've seen smoke bush grow 12 feet in a year. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. A cane count, it's multiple canes up 12 feet tall. And that was only, what summer was that? I know we were at Janesville because we saw their stuff. So it must have been someplace in the last 8, 9 years. But yeah, smoke bush has beautiful foliage on it and more prettier foliage, better color on the younger stems. You won't get any smoke. You won't get the flower and the fluff, which some people with air conditioning units that suck in the fluff would appreciate. But it will grow like crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if, like our client Julie down in Dayton, that you have to cut it hard in the spring and then go out there and cut off the overgrowth in July before it gets to be 12 feet tall.
Yeah. Suzanne said she killed one by cutting it to the ground, but you can't be 100% sure that's why it died. It could have been the timing. It could have been other things.
I had a willow.
It can happen.
We put a willow in at Sue's house, not different Sue. And she likes the native, so it was a good thing to put in there. But we started it little and we put it in and it wouldn't grow. I said, what is wrong with this thing? I think I have pictures of that on the website too. I took it out of the ground. Who would think that a willow would girdle itself? But this willow had so many branches coming up in the piece they'd stuck that it was girdling itself and it needed to be ungirdled. So there's a lot of reasons that a willow will die, but if it's established and was growing at speed, I have no compunction about cutting them down. They come back like crazy.
And yeah, we've had plants that we thought were growing really well and cut back hard. I remember some burning bush in particular that didn't even budge.
Yeah, and you haven't lost anything. If
Yeah.
you put it back hard and it doesn't come back, all you lost is a plant that couldn't live by your rules. And so go ahead and cut things back. If you can't handle it the size that it is, give it one chance, cut it back and watch what it does. But yeah, sometimes, which the burning bush that I'm remembering was one that had some dieback in it, because they do get dieback from, well, at least our old book said it was from unidentified causes. Now somebody's telling me that they think they found what it is that happens, but it usually happens in a year when it's been droughty, and they'll die back in chunks.
Okay. Not much, nothing else in chat.
All right, so we'll talk about another problem. Maybe I should go with more colorful stuff, but we'll stay there. Mites. Some mites are good. Well, we were at the beekeepers conference this spring. Some students from the University of Toledo were showing their graduate projects, and one of them had been looking at the beneficial predatory mites that live on the backs of ferns. In the little, if those of you who grow ferns would know about the little fuzzy brown hairs almost that are in a bunch right where the veins come together on the back of a fern. Well, these are shelters. That's where the mites live, and the mites eat fungus spores. So they keep fungus from browning out the tips of the ferns, and they were studying how they could either block or allow or encourage the mites there. So some mites are good, some mites are bad, but they're all spider relatives, tiny critters. And we have a lilac with a problem in it. I was crawling around in the back of this lilac, which is in our shrub border. Was here when we got here. And I looked and went, oh, darn. This is a pretty sure sign of eriophyid mites. That's ERIOPHYIID. You figure out how to pronounce that. Eriophyid mite.
If Sonia was here, like she is on our webinar, she would be typing that spelling in
and getting the pronunciation for us.
I'm not
a
speller.
These mites get into the plant and they feed and irritate the plant so that it creates more meristems, which is good for the mites. They like meristems, but is bad for the plant. These are not going to grow and produce anything. These little tiny twigs are going to grow up and die back. And at the base of the shrub, they're everywhere. I've seen this on lilac. I've seen it on Weigelia. I've seen it on Caryopteris. I've taken samples into Extension in Massachusetts because they said, oh, we've never seen that on our nursery stock. I said, well, I have. But when you see this, you're not going to be able to get rid of the mites. I don't know just how contagious it is. This lilac and its partner next to it have to come out. I'm pretty sure the problem is that they are growing on top of plastic. I took out plastic and mulch that was in there, but it turns out that there's another layer of plastic about 6 inches down, and this is planted on top of it. That's going to stress the plant, and it's never going to come back. So we've been watching it since we moved in. I saw that it had mites. Year by year, the leaves are getting smaller, they're getting paler.
The blooms are getting smaller. There are less blooms. It wasn't blooming
Yeah,
as late into the year.
yeah. So I'm cutting it down to take it out because all of this little twiggy stuff is getting twiggier and tinier and less vigorous. So if you
And
see
it was it was a hummingbird attractor too, though.
it was,
And
we're working on what we're going to put in there
we'll
instead.
replace it though.
Yeah. So watch for strange growth. You see strange growth, start Googling pictures of things. It's
Yep.
so much easier than it used to be. I would sit at night while Steve was playing hockey on Xbox or something, and I would sit with our pest and disease books, and I would be flipping through looking for something that looked like that. Now, with artificial intelligence and the search engines that we've got, if you take a picture of it and you slide that picture into search, you can get amazing results. Just look for the ones that say extension, EXT, or EDU, so that you get the straight scoop, not some,
Pitch,
yeah, right.
sales pitch. Therese has a hand up.
Hey,
Go
Trace.
ahead, Therese.
Hi guys, I'm so sorry. My internet's very sketchy right now, and I missed what the obvious signs are of the mites on that lilac.
The
Could you
obvious,
repeat that?
the obvious signs are the strange growth, are the um, clustered, undersized, weak sprouts that come generally from the base, but as time goes by, they start coming from other parts of the plant too. That's your main thing that you're going to see. Otherwise, what you'll see is before those sprouts start showing, you would see a weaker plant, but there's a zillion reasons why it could be weaker.
And did you ever see the actual mite, or are they too tiny?
Oh, no, I've never seen the actual mite. These are itty bitty guys. I'm pretty sure I could see them with a microscope if I took the right sample out, but I haven't done that. I like this Iris reticulata here, Steve.
Yeah,
And there's a bunch of different kinds. Is this one here? I see all that wood.
yeah, this one was here in 21.
Okay. We used to use nice mulch, real finely ground bark. I'm someday going to be able to afford that again. But here, every time we hear a chipper running and chainsaws going, we go see where they're taking a tree down and we get them to dump the chips here. I want to see this stuff get reused. I just don't like using it as much. It doesn't go so well visually with perennials.
Barbara mentions that the mites also are the carriers of rosette disease also.
Yeah, I'm not sure that area-fied mites are that.
Some kind of.
Yeah, there are lots of kinds of mites. I'm going to wait on our walkabout here and go on.
Yeah. Judith has a hand up too.
Go ahead, Judith.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I've been reflecting about my late garden, and I realize that my vegetable gardening is kind of the triumph of hope over experience. I 3 years ago, I had a soil test, and I was told that I had way overdone the composting, and it had much too much phosphorus and calcium, and just give it nitrogen. Um, I get 6 hours of sun at the very best a day in the air. It's the sunniest area that I could have put it in. Um, it could There could be many reasons why my gardening, my vegetables are not like prime. Sometimes they do well. A few of them do well, some not so much. And I just thinking that this year I want to be a little more systematic about diagnosing why they don't do well, or what I should just not ever try again.
Okay.
So I'm wondering about a process. That's really what I'm asking about. How do you, it could be multiple things, how do you figure out what it is?
The only real way to find out what is wrong about a site or what could be improved about a site is to grow something in two different places. And 6 hours of sun at the outside edge, I'm going to assume that some parts of the garden get less than that. That's minimum for plants that are most of our vegetable plants. They're grown in wide open fields. I mean, there is nothing but sun around them all the time. So that's going to be a big reason that your plants don't produce quite as well. And it's also going to be a reason why they get more problems, because if they're not in full sun, then they're not making all the chemicals they can make. I'm not sure you want to put a sun lamp out there. One of my clients did that. She put a lamp on her roses to get them more sun for the day. But that's really all you can do is plant the same, start 6 tomato plants and plant 3 of them at a friend's house in full sun and 3 of them at your house. And you would have to test the friend's soil, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. Yes, if you've got much too much phosphorus, the phosphorus can actually cling to other nutrients and stop them from being available to plants. They don't dissolve into the soil moisture. So you might have some problems, but phosphorus deficient, potassium deficiencies and nitrogen deficiencies are very obvious on plants. You can take a look at the leaf and it's a little like looking at a person and saying, you're kind of pale today, or you're awful red today. If the color is wrong, you can take a picture of that leaf and put it in and you'll get, like tomatoes, for instance, there's whole books that show you what the deficiency is. And you could say, okay, so I need to give them more potassium, or I need to give them more nitrogen. But I don't know that there's any more way to do that than to be trial and error.
You just kind of use integrated pest management. You just go out daily and look at the plants, and vegetable gardeners have to do that more often than any others if they want a crop. It's the most maintenance intensive gardening you can do is
It is
vegetable.
indeed, because you have to be there every day. And
Yeah.
if you watch every day and see the new leaves turning a different color, new leaves tend to use a certain set of nutrients more than the old leaves do. If the old leaves start turning color, then probably you're out low on nitrogen. If the new leaves are turning color, then there's something else going wrong. And all of that, which leaf it is and when it happens, before flowering, after flowering, is all part of diagnosing what the problems are. But you could just grow one crop this year, just grow tomatoes, and that makes it easier to say, okay, now I got tomatoes figured out, and then next year grow beans. But I think you're doing the same thing that most of us do, which is we put them in and hope we're going to get some stuff.
Yep.
And that,
May I ask you a quick corollary question? I've lost a community garden plot, so I'm going to have to be using grow bags this year. And a few plants have done well, but a lot of them really haven't. And I'm wondering, what you can do to raise the odds in a
By
grow.
grow bags, you're growing them in the cloth bag, right, above
Yeah,
ground.
exactly.
Yeah, the problem with the grow bags is they're not, even a tomato by middle of July has roots 2 feet deep. So you don't have a great deal of rooting space. You don't have a great deal for that plant to draw on. It's watering that's the problem. Just like in the planters, it's a real problem to water, to keep things watered enough and watered steadily enough. So I think your grow bags, your best bet is to find some way to wick water to them. There are some systems that you can put plants in planters that have double walls and they hold water reservoirs in them. But you can also make a wicking arrangement yourself with a big bucket of water and a wick material. You can use piping that we used to, if it's still made out of cotton, it used to be by cotton, a rolled string. No, that's not right. But you would make it to put piping into the edges of pillows that you were making yourself. And you could take piping and put it in the bucket and then let it drip down into the grow bag, coil it around in the grow bag, and then plant on top of that wick. And the wick will keep pulling water from the more regularly from the bucket, and you wouldn't have to worry quite so much about it. But water is going to be the main thing with things growing in containers. They just cannot get the same amount of water there. And water is everything.
Or if the roots are young, they might get too much water.
Mhm.
Yeah, although in those cloth bags, it should run right out.
Yeah, should go right out.
Yep.
Yep.
Barbara's
you.
looked it up and says the area mites are the carriers of rosette disease. I didn't realize. I thought that the birds were carrying those mites around. But anyway, I have a reprise to our rose blooming because people asked us about this, and I thought, how silly. I showed you that I did this to the carpet roses in pruning, and I did this to climbing rose in pruning. And someone said, well, did they bloom? You got a picture of them blooming. I said, I pulled out the article to show you that there is an article called Roses Trained, and you can find it by searching for the word pillar because it's a pillar rose. And in that article, I show you the rose. This is an Elizabeth rose and the climber rose that I showed you about. And we even have a diagram in there to tell you which canes to cut how. And there it is blooming in the article, along with a couple of arrows showing you the growth that's not going to bloom because it's coming to, well, it might bloom way late in the summer. It's coming later, but most of the blooms are where it's on the horizontal, not on the straight up and down. So it mentions that you're still pruning in July, nipping back the green growth because you want to enjoy the flowers. And the pillar rose that I showed you, training it to go around, here it is blooming, and you'll see the straight up and down branches are not bearing flowers. It's the side branches on the ones that we bent around that are bearing the most flowers. And by the end of the year, it's telling you I'm going to need to be pruned again. I just pruned a rose back today. It's a hybrid tea rose. And I tell people, prune roses back until you have solid white pith. You don't want discolored pith or damaged cambium. You want to cut back to white growth. So you keep cutting until you get to white. And this one right here is coming from below this part. And that's why you cut them down. You want good growth coming from plants that have not had, canes that have not had any problems up above. This one might have rose rosette. We'll see what happens this year. Okay, so I'm sorry that I forgot to put the pictures in. We never think of that. We figure we're just pruning right now.
We do the best we can.
And sometimes, like on that Elizabeth rose and on the rose, the red cascade rose in the little obelisk, I don't have a picture of that year of it blooming. And it would be unfair to show you something of a different year. You want to show it from the same year. I'm not in everybody's garden at all the right times. I'll get there a week after the roses have looked wonderful. Isn't that true of most gardens? That you tell people all the time, you should have been here last week, or oh, I wish you could come back next week. Yeah.
Nothing in chat.
Yeah. Look at those windflowers coming up. Pasque flowers, prairie crocus. They're so beautiful. They come up with all that fur around the flowers.
Fuzzy wuzzies.
Yeah, and they're great ground cover. See, I don't cut them back. I just let them lie down. And they cover the ground really nicely. There's still some things that'll try to come up in there, but it's a lot less weeding than I would have to.
Yeah, but once that foliage starts, nothing's coming up through that.
Except that the rug juniper that's
Woodies.
there is winning. Yeah, it's coming.
Woodies win.
This week I did some pruning on a spruce. We're 12 years into keeping this spruce small, and now we've got leadership trouble. So I looked at it. We cut it 2 years ago, and I'm not going to cut it again. I told my son, I said, it's now gotten some young men decided to climb it 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago. It was the year I was supposed to prune it, and they broke several branches on this side. And I said, I've got to let it fill back into those spaces. And now it's gotten too wide. The green doesn't go far enough in down here for me to cut it here. It would leave too much brown. So I said, I'm not going to cut it again. We've let it go too far. But there's the leader that I left it 2 years ago. And can you see the other parts of the plant turning up saying, I want to be the top two? You see it?
Yep.
I've been looking at it all winter going up. I'm not going to prune that spruce again, but I do want it to fill out as a pyramidal shape again. So I'm going to take those off. So there they are off. Fill the whole bag of a whole yard waste bag with the branches that I cut off of to cut into there to cut. I didn't shear it. I cut into the branch, into the canopy to take branches out to leave the 1 meter as the top dog.
Which he
Yeah.
should be.
Yeah, see how narrow it used to be? This was maybe the second time that I cut it back. I'm taking the top off and then I'm going to cut the sides down. But I can't go that narrow anymore because there's not enough live green buds inside that outline. The breakage was the worst. And I'm also not going to do it again because I'm not supposed to be up on a ladder for 2 hours. I can go
No.
on a ladder and do a little bit of something, but I'm not going to stand on a ladder for 2 hours anymore. And that's in Garden A to Z called Reduce a Spruce. Takes you through the first time we cut it. We cut 5 feet off of it because it had grown way too big. And that was 12 years ago. And if I was able, if I was not suffering from unbalance and tremors, we'd be able to still keep cutting it, but we're not. Beautiful witch hazel, aren't they?
It is.
And this is the time of year when if you've got pollen allergies, a lot of these guys like the red maples are opening up
The red silver crosses are too.
thousands and thousands of flowers opening. We are such suckers for color. Thank you, Tanya, for sending what you sent here. I told you last week about getting down on my knees going, oh, I'm so glad you guys are here. They've now opened up. That's Catherine's Gold. It's an Iris hystrioides. It's another of the very early blooming iris. I tend to call them all Iris reticulata, and they're not. And here's what's really delighting me. It is multiplying. See the shoot coming up?
Yep. There's another one there.
Yeah, and there's another one right there. Yep.
And last year that clump was 3 flowers.
Yeah, I just love seeing color this time of year. I don't even mind that the purple crocuses, which will come up right through the juniper. Notice this, they will come up right through the juniper. Why do we worry about leaves? They come up through all kinds of things. I don't even mind that they moved out into the lawn. Some people might mind that.
Oh, I wish they'd let it go out in the lawn. Think of how the bees would love that.
Yeah, and it was interesting.
No more May.
Right down at the other end of this bed, about 20 feet away, there's a whole set. This is one clump of about 10 clumps of this lilac, lavender colored, lighter shade of crocus. And this one, when it opened up, was covered with honeybees. There had to be a dozen honeybees just on this clump. And then there were all these other clumps around there. And at the same time, there was nothing on the dark purple ones. I don't know if they'd already collected from the dark purple ones or whether there's just that much difference, but they were very happy. We've noticed over the years that the day that the crocus opens, the day the snow crocus opens, there's a bee on it. And that is just miraculous to me.
Yep.
I know it has to do with accumulated temperatures but still.
Lily was asking about the iris gold, probably the variegated iris we showed. How tall are they? In the questions, it was in questions.
In questions. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The iris with the stripe on it. There's a gold one and a white striped one. They're standard German iris size. So the flower stands up about 18 inches, sometimes 2 feet, and the foliage is a foot or so up out of the ground. And we grow.
And the foliage is the attractive. The flowers are all right, but the foliage is spectacular. Yeah. There's a yellow variety and a whitish variety.
The leaf, the flower.
The leaf, foliage.
The flower on both of them is just a light purple. I've seen people, when they're in bloom, ask, what is that plant? And I say, well, that iris over there. And they hadn't even noticed the flowers sitting above the foliage because they're so focused on the foliage. I was disappointed to see this. At first thrilled to see it. When did I see it? Tuesday, when I was out cutting the dappled willow down. I said, look, our little witch hazel actually has a lot of flowers on it, but I forgot to take a picture of it. And now today, they got cold in the snow yesterday.
They bounced back. That questions picture that was of that plant was today.
That's today?
That's today.
Oh, well, cool. Then they bounced back. I thought that why would a witch hazel have, good. So let's see if
it's like they were just shivering for a little while, getting close, like you put your hands in mittens to get your fingers together to warm up, and then you could spread your hands out.
Oh, interesting. What
Yep.
we learned. So I got this today from Tanya. She said, "Have you seen these? Could this be real?" I said, "No, I don't think so. I don't think there's hostas that color." Um, and I'd like to know if you can see the difference between this is one of those kids magazine challenges. Can you see the difference in the pictures between the left one and the right one? I took the lady out. So this is just me photoshopping. And I added another one of these. This looks to me like foxglove flowers, you guys, not hosta flowers. I put another flower in and took her out. And that's just me with my shaky hands doing Photoshop. These are artificial intelligence. These are AI generated photographs. And no, they're not real. Mostly if you drag one of those pictures into the search engine, you're going to find a lot of nurseries you've never heard of before. Typhoid Land, Deer Go-Go, um,
I mean, those could be jungle type, houseplant type,
no,
but
they're not. They're
it's not.
what they are is, for instance, this one is going to tell you it's going to send you 10 mixed color hosta plant roots. You're not going to get one that color. You'll get mixed color. Others say they're seeds. There we go. Dark blue hosta seeds. By the time that hosta grows, if they even send you actual live seed, you know you're not going to get the same plant. Anything that come up like that would be a variety, would be a clonal variety, would not come true from seed. But anyway, these are a joke. These are not true. If you don't find it sold by something that you know about, Implaneta, rare hostas from Etsy, um, one of them was listed as rare canna lily seeds. Okay, guys, it's not a canna. But they know we're suckers for color. They know that we're dying to bring more things into our yard. Don't fall for this stuff. Go for take the name and put it into one of the good catalogs that you know, like Wayside or Bluestone Perennials or Digging Dog Nursery or Burpee Seed, Ball Seed. Take one of those. And while I was at it, I was remembering about words. And when we were talking about mistletoe several weeks ago, which is can be a problem in weakened oak trees, and especially south of us, but we were talking about the fact that it's parasitic, that it is actually taking energy from the plant, and that Spanish moss, which hangs from oak trees, is not taking anything from the plants. And I kept saying it was S. There's symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship. That's not it. The Spanish moss doesn't give anything back to the oak. It just hangs on it. Saprophytic lives on dead organisms. I said, no, it's an E, Janet, it's an E. Epiphytic lives on, but doesn't take from. It's just support. And epiphytic, there are a lot of orchids that are epiphytic. They just sit in the crotch of the tree, growing in the accumulated leaf litter. Epiphytic is the word we were looking for back then. And this one is saprophytic, grows on dead wood. Don't you love it? Isn't it beautiful? Thank goodness they do too, because we'd be awash in dead stuff.
Okay. Arena says, so if there is a second trunk on blue juniper, should it be cut back altogether?
If you want it to be a pyramidal tree, you want it to have one leader, one trunk. If it's got multiple trunks, unless it's a globe blue spruce that you want to have be bush out and be wider, that you would leave. But with a pyramidal tree, a regular tree, get rid of those extra leaders, follow it back down to where it came from and take it out.
Arena also has a hand up.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
Hello. I just
Hello.
have a quick question about alliums. I have lots and lots of alliums that I planted, and they all, I guess, multiply, and the bulbs are dividing. And there are lots of clumps, and I was thinking there are other places where I would like to have alliums, but I didn't plant them because in the fall, they're all gone and you cannot see where to
Can't
plant.
find where they are. You can
Right.
move them around now.
That's what my question is. Can I, if I dig them up deep enough, can I actually not just move them, but can I divide the clump?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You
And
divide
they will
daffodils
grow?
and allium and tulips, and you need to get them back into the ground real quickly so they're not shipping those bulbs around this time of year, but no problem at all in digging them up and moving them around.
So even if the roots are damaged a little bit, which would be unavoidable because it's a large clump, they will still bloom this year.
Probably, yes. If you damage them enough, then you might get just leaf on it. That's
No,
what's
I
going on.
understand there. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So it's all right just to dig them up and move them right now.
Yeah, and congratulations, because alliums pick their place, especially the giant alliums. In some places, they grow and they come back in the same place, but they don't multiply. In other places, they go crazy and they multiply all over the place. They seed
I
themselves
think
around.
mine go crazy because they just like from one bulb I planted, there's a huge clump in every place.
Yeah, well, if they are millennium, if they're the short, maybe 18-inch, 2-foot alliums that bloom later in the summer, if they're millennium, they are terrible seeders around, and as in they're dropping seed all over the place. You might want to watch out for those. Those and the blue drumstick alliums are two that I say, I'm not going to put in the garden anymore because they become too weedy for me. Let's look
No, these are the big globe ones, and they are all different kinds. 1 year, 2 years ago, I went to Menards, and they had 7 different type of allium.
Yeah,
Like,
so the ones with the great.
and I just went crazy and planted them.
Yeah, they're great
Because they're
plants. Some of them are great
gorgeous.
big globes that sit right on the ground, and some are up high and baseball sized. And yes, they're great. Their alliums are great to have around.
All right, I'm gonna divide them tomorrow.
Good.
Sue, is any suggestions for getting an early start on to improve the lawn besides aerating and raking? The seeds have really, the weeds have really expanded. And I'm trying to avoid chemical applications. I would definitely core aerate and do it double direction, do a lot of coring, rake it out and top dress with seed.
Yeah, definitely seed and use one of the seeds that's got a mulch in it.
Yep.
They look blue when you throw it down, but you need to get ahead of the weeds. And the weeds, you're going to have to spot weed if you're not using a chemical, because you're trying to grow 100,000 of the same plant in one place, and you're not, for the most part, going to be able to keep the weeds out unless you get the plants growing thick enough to crowd the seedlings out themselves. But you'll have to spot weed at least some of the places where those are. Oh, that's what I meant to put in. Someone asked about the a herbicide called spruce, and they said, what is it? I looked at what its active ingredients are, and it's a burn down chemical. There are safer pesticides that basically just burn the leaf on the top, and maybe you'd be just spot treating some of those to get rid of them rather than pulling them out by hand.
Okay.
Planters, the whole bit with planters is water. You got to have water. You have to be able to water. In a botanical garden, they've got to come by every single day. They better not forget to water. And some of the best planters are easily saved over the winter rather than concrete like this. They're lighter weight or they're permanent. But the best of them have a reservoir in them to help you keep you from having to come out every day to water. These are the containers that Barry Burton told us that they're using now in the city of Detroit. They come from a company called Earth Planter. And this is Michigan Central Station. They took pictures of Barry's plantings in the pots. There is a double wall, hollow wall, and you fill the planter with water, and the reservoir's in the bottom. And there's a wick that comes out and around the plants. According to Barry, once the annuals begin to fill in, usually by about the middle of June, they can back off on watering. They only have to fill the reservoir maybe every 3 or 4 weeks. Until then, they do need to keep watering because the plant's roots have not spread out far enough in there to be taking advantage of all that water. But if you want to grow things well in a planter, then water is essential. Either you have to be there regularly watering it and don't let it dry down, but keep it moist pretty much all the time, or you need something that's got a reservoir in it. Now, these are big planters and they're expensive. Even at wholesale, they're hundreds of dollars each, but there are smaller planters with reservoirs, and they can work as well. Because all of those roots have to reach out and down before they're really taking advantage.
Yep.
Let's see, I think we had,
We got about a minute and a half.
okay, weeping trees. A lot of people have weeping trees, and the big problem is sorting out the weepiness. If they weep in orderly fashion, we'd be in great shape. So Irina sent in this picture of her Japanese weeping willow, which got too crazy in the garden, so she put it in a pot, and she says it still gets too crazy. Yes, they hit the ground. It's a tree growing sideways, really, these weepers are. And it's going to grow at great rate. That's that light reddish color wood. That's 1 year's growth. 1 year's growth. From here on down, 1 year's growth. So it's going to grow 18 inches, 2 feet a year. And you have to prune accordingly. You got to say, okay, I'll prune you back far enough that you can have 18 inches or 24 inches to grow. But first you got to sort it out. And it takes looking at it at different angles to say, okay, how am I going to sort this out here? Look at it from above. And if I'm looking at it here, I'm looking at this branch right here and saying, you arose from a trunk that's going this way. Why are you crossing back over everybody else? You got to go. You're a crosser. I'm not going to take it out right now. I'm going to keep looking because I'm going to find that this one is also crossing. This guy is growing to the right from a trunk that was going to the left. How many trunks do I need here? 3, 4, and by trunks I mean main branches coming off the weeping section. I mean maybe 3 or 4. So I'm going to look and I'm going to take out the weak ones. See, this one has got cracked bark and cambium. I'm going to cut that right off. Gone. Dead wood. Maybe it's got some growth coming from it, but it's not the vigorous plant. So I'm going to take that back to the main trunk and take that off. I'm going to take off something like this. And once I get those off, then I'm going to use a very careful small saw. And this is the problem with weeping trees, is trying to get in there to get these things off. But you might only be able to move the saw back and forth an inch at a time, but you got to get that wood out of there and get it down to the numbers that you want to have. So if I look at it from this way, I can see that this one, which is one of the one of the crossers I just pointed out to you. This one is coming from a branch that started down here and wrapped around everybody. So you know what? I think that whole thing needs to come out. So I might end up with one source of branches over here, one over here, and one on the backside. 3 sources of branches, and I'm going to cut it back hard every year. But
Irina said she did saw it off, all that dead stuff.
well, good. Now you just got to saw off the parts that are going in the wrong direction. The example that we have for the weeping tree is a weeping mulberry. If you search for weeping mulberry, you'll get deadly dense weeping mulberry. We like this look, where each branch has its own part of the sky, not this that just happens as it just keeps building more and more wood. It takes a long time to sort it out. I had to sort this one out, and here's what I left. And that's every year. Every year, cut back to there. Every year, it's going to have 4 feet of growth and have branches hanging all the way down. So you have to let it grow as much as it wants to grow, and it's telling you how much it wants to grow. And you need to sort out the branches, which one goes in which direction.
It's after 8 and there's no questions.
Okay, then we'll wrap up here. Make a plea again for, please tell people about our webinars. Tell them that they can sign up for one webinar or they can sign up for a whole season, but it's what pays the thousands of dollars that it takes us to pay for the website hosting, for the Zoom contract, for the security clearance that gives us an HTTPS. And we do pay our speakers, our guest speakers who come in. So we want to keep doing that, and it's you subscribers that make that happen and make it possible for us to do Free4All Fridays too. So tell somebody about this. Thank you very much for being here today. Let's see. Does this go to the end? Time to take the leaves off of those hellebores.
That was today.
There's our snake showing off his pollen-colored pung.
Yep.
Okay. And I'll save the pesticide training for you for next time. Because it's time to start thinking about maybe fungus control if you've really got something that you're babying, and we'll talk about that on the 28th, because our next time up is the 28th, isn't it, Steve?
Pardon me? Yeah, we'll be here on the 28th.
Yep. And I think on the 28th, we will be at our separate machines, but I'm going to be in South
Yep.
Carolina and you're going to be here.
Yep.
That's it. Thank you for being here for Free for All Friday. Bring your questions, send your questions ahead. If you send pictures, we try to get them in. If we send the pictures if they get here by Thursday night, sometimes I check early Friday morning, but if they get here by Thursday night,
Thursday is better, please.
it is. So next time we'll be here is March 28th. We'll see you then. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a great week. Ta-ta for now.